Listeners, what if the key to understanding your characters and your readers came down to something as simple as a cup of coffee? That's one of the many things I will talk about today as I speak with my dear friend, the brilliant author, writing coach, and rule breaking storyteller, Lindz McLeod. Lindz is the author of The Unlikely Pursuit of Mary Bennet, which was a finalist for the Romance Novel of the Year Award, as well as the Craft Anthology An Honor and a Privilege. And that's just scratching the surface of what she published in 2025 alone. There is so much I could talk about with Lindz, but for this episode, we've narrowed it down to writing voice, character motivation, the iceberg principle, and the reason we write, which is the most important part of all. Because, as Lindz puts it, writing is the language of emotions. And this conversation is going to help you speak it better no matter what genre you're working in. Let's dive in. Welcome to Writing Resilience, the podcast for writers who want to write and live the story that sets them free. I'm your host, Lisa Cooper Ellison, a writer, transformational and trauma-informed coach, story alchemist, and fellow traveler on the winding road of healing and creativity. Each week, I'll share tools, practices, and conversations that will help you let go of what no longer serves you as you create stories that change lives, especially your own. Together, we'll explore how to trust your creative voice, support your mental health and resilience, work with your nervous system and unique design, and stay connected to your deepest calling as a writer, even when life gets messy. It's time, my friends, to write and live the story that sets you free. I'm honored to walk that journey alongside you, one story and one episode at a time. Well, hello, Lindz. Welcome to the Writing Your Resilience podcast. I am so happy to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been very excited about this.
Well, I've been excited about having you on the show for, oh my gosh, a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I mean, since your wife, Zabib, was on the show, which was back in early 2024, it's one of those things where it's like it needs to be the right time and the right topic so that everything fits together with everything else I'm doing. And this just seemed to be the right time. Everything coalesced in the ways that it needed to. And you have so many fabulous things happening that I'm excited to talk about. So I'm going to hold up two of your books. You have another one that is just coming out. So this is The Unlikely Pursuit of Mary Bennet. And we also have An Honor and a Privilege. And this is just, I'm going to say, a tiny smattering of the things that you have published and even a tiny hair fraction of all of the things you've written. So what would you like everyone to know today about you and your writing, and specifically about these books?
I mean, it's a tough question because I immediately want to say everything all at once. I think probably the kind of takeaway, if I was to kind of pitch myself, is that I do my best to write the stories that don't exist yet, whatever that looks like. I'm always interested in a range of genres and characters. I don't kind of like to stick to one particular genre, but I'm always trying to get to the core of something. I feel like I've described it as writing is like peeling an onion over and over until you get to the emotional heart of it. And for me, it doesn't matter if you say a story in a supermarket in the present day, or if it's 1,000 years in the future on another planet or whatever, but we might not understand the character's job or the social rules of this world or whatever, but we understand connect with emotions because that's the universal language. In the same way that a single violin playing a mournful dirge sounds very different to an upbeat kind of summery pop song. And I think writing is all about how we can learn to speak that language of emotions more effectively to each other and tell stories better. Also, I teach writing. Can you tell? I'm a huge dork. So that's what I like to do. I like to learn all the rules and then sometimes break them as well, which I think I've done with some of the books that we're going to talk about today.
Oh, you are a master at breaking the rules. And that's one of the things I love about you. And I mean, I've loved that since we met back in 2019 in New York City at the Writers Hotel Conference. It is so hard to believe that much time has gone by. But your writing life has really exploded. I know a lot of people who are productive, but I don't know anyone who's written as many novels in 1 year as you have. So just give us a sense of how productive you are. Let's just talk about 2025, okay?
Okay, yes, the year in isolation. So in 2025, I technically only published 2 books. No, wait, 3 that year. And I did publish a few other short stories and things as well. But I am a terrible workaholic. I will throw my hands up and say that straight away. You probably knew it when we first met, and it's only become more concentrated since. I really love to write, I love to tell stories, and the more I kind of teach and talk about it, the easier it becomes in certain ways and the more interesting it becomes. So again, always kind of peeling and peeling to get it like, how can this story be better than the ones that I've written? How can I say something more effectively, cleanly? How can I touch someone else's heart with just words? So yeah, that's all a nice pretty blanket to throw over it so that you don't notice that I just am a terrible workaholic who loves to work. And whenever my wife is home and not on any of her many travels, I am placed on a work curfew. I'm not supposed to work after 10 p.m. because it's not okay. So, but when she's gone, all bets are off. It's all good.
I think if you love what you're doing, it's really hard to stop.
Yeah.
And so I sort of have a work curfew. We have to have dinner at a certain time
Yeah.
and then we rest. It's helpful to have that. But I'm going to tell you, if I go on a writing retreat by myself, there is no curfew.
Yeah.
And it's because I'm in this space where I get to do what I love. And what I want to point out that you talked about, and I think this is a thing that no matter what genre you're working on, is the importance of touching someone else's heart. And the way we do that is tapping into these internal conflicts that we have, right? These internal issues. And then in fiction, of course, you're creating a whole world that's separate from you where things happen and all of that gets worked out. And in memoir, of course, it's your own life and you're working out something that's personal and based on real life. So you work in a lot of different genres. You're also a writing coach. And so we're going to talk about how writers can apply the concepts we're going to talk about today, regardless of the genre that they are working in. And the first one I want to talk about is The Unlikely Pursuit of Mary Bennett. This is a romance. People who understand how romance works and how lucrative romance is respect it. Even if they don't read it, they respect it for what it can do and how wide reaching it is. But if people don't understand it or they've been like, oh, romance, not for me, and not learn anything, right? And if you're not watching me on YouTube, I have my hand up. What would you like them to know about romance and also about this specific book, which I love? And also, I'm going to admit, I don't read a lot of romance. I'm not going to say never, but not a lot.
Well, firstly, I love the way you rolled your R's there. I think we should always be romance. It should never, it just makes it sound so much more passionate.
Romance.
So I didn't write any romance before I wrote Unlikely Pursuit of Mary Bennett. And it was my fabulous agent, Laura Zatz, who had said to me, I have really good ties with these editors. Have you ever considered writing romance? And I said, oh, Laura, I don't write romance. And she said, you do, though. It's in most of your work. There's some kind of element or someone having an interpersonal relationship that could be romantic. And I went, well, surely not that much of it. And then I went and looked, and I was deeply annoyed to find she was right. And I was like, okay, well, I'll give it a go. I'm not promising anything, but okay, I'll try. And again, at that point, I hadn't really read a lot of romance either. So I didn't necessarily know a lot of the tropes. So one of the things that had always interested me was Charlotte Lucas, who in the original Pride and Prejudice is, depending on which version of it you're watching for the more iconic lines, she is 27, an old spinster hag who's a burden on her parents and will never find a man, etc., etc., and feels pretty bad about this, especially when compared to her friends, Lizzie and Jane, the eldest of the Bennet sisters, who are kind of prettier and wittier and brighter. And Charlotte ends up marrying the Bennet's cousin, Mr. Collins. Depending again on which version of this you watch or read, Mr. Collins is more or less obsequious and odious in various, although I do think he's sort of a sympathetic character in some ways. But this is seen as Jane Austen kind of providing the reader with, okay, you're going to watch Elizabeth and Darcy deal with their own pride and get over their own prejudices and find that happy ending with each other. But Charlotte is there as not exactly a cautionary tale, but it is something in canon to show you this doesn't often happen, this love match, this romance. It is more common for a woman to settle for somebody and to try and make an attempt for a man that she might not even care for very much at all, because remaining unmarried carries with it a huge stigma. So that kind of is always Charlotte Lucas's backstory. We do kind of feel quite sympathetic about her as a secondary character. And she does have clearly her own reasons for doing this, and they're quite self-evident. I thought it might be kind of interesting to explore why she is the way she is, and why some of the things that she says to Lizzie in the original Pride and Prejudice book is something like, you don't need to really know a man before you marry him. In fact, the less you know, the better. And I've never been romantic in my life. I'm very practical. I'll just marry this guy and it'll be fine. And I thought, what might make you romantic, Charlotte Lucas? What might induce you to open your heart a little? What or who might be able to show you the light in some kind of different way? And funnily enough, because Mr. Collins, he's a man of the cloth, and he lives at the parsonage at Hunsford outside the Catherine de Bourgh's house, Rosings, the great estate, he is therefore looking for quite a nice girl to take as a wife. And one of the things I find really interesting about this is there would have been an obvious Bennet sister that he could have ended up with, Mary, because Mary is the one who is kind of pious and a bit preachy and awkward, and because she's the middle sister of 5 girls, she's not quite in either category, and she doesn't seem to really have great relations with her sisters in either direction. She's very much an odd one out. She would have been quite a good wife for him, but Charlotte kind of got him first. And I thought, I wonder again, what would happen if Mary grew up and was allowed to find her own way? And what would happen if she was able to get out from under her mother's very oppressive marriage-oriented thumb and was able to explore more interests than just who is the nearest gentleman that you can throw yourself at? And of course, because of the kind of time period that it is, the early 1800s, science is very much blooming. People are attending scientific and literary salons. They're talking about big ideas. And this all kind of came together into Unlikely Pursuit. So Charlotte's husband, Mr. Collins, dies in the very first line of the book, which might be the best line I've ever written. I think I've peaked. I don't know if I'll ever do better than that. And she writes to Lizzie asking her friend to come and comfort her in her time of need. And Lizzie's like, I'm really sorry, my son is sick, but you know who's passing by? Mary. I don't know, you didn't really like Mary, but Mary's going to come and hang out with you for a little while just to kind of keep you company. And it just doesn't quite go as anybody expected. And it turned into be a really romantic book. I wrote it for Zabib, who exactly has this kind of romantic tendency. A lot of it is based around floriography, the meanings of flowers. We got married about 7 weeks ago, and I actually was able to use some of that floriography in our wedding. I was like, listen, I will never let a good fact lie. I have all this stuff that I learned, and I haven't been able to do anything with it. So we were able to use it in our bouquets. I used it in the jewelry that I was wearing, and I also forced people in my toast to learn some flower facts as well. So fun and educational is the best thing a book can be, I think. So I managed that.
Yeah, you definitely pulled that off and so much more. And so people know, this was a finalist for the Romance Novel of the Year award, which is huge, right? So you pulled off a lot. And that is a killer first line. However, I know you, and I know you haven't peaked. That's way down the road. But this book nails so much so well. I mean, the sentimentality, I felt like I believed these characters. I felt like I was reading just an extension of that original series. You really pull this off so well. And one of the things you're talking about with this, and specifically with romance, is that it's all about relationships. And I think because a lot of people are memoirists who listen to this podcast, we can get so stuck in our own relationships, we don't always understand how they work. And that's one thing that romance can teach us, is how relationships work and don't work, and also where motivations lie. And I think sometimes that's easier to understand when you're not working in reality, because you have some distance from it and you can play around with it. And as you were thinking about this book and working on it, What role did motivation play in terms of how you brought these characters together? Because the work you do with flowers, oh my gosh, it's so good. And you're able to say so much. And I think probably get away with so much in that book with the way that you put all of that together. But how did motivation come into play? And if people don't understand what I mean by motivation, what would you like them to know about that word in terms of storytelling?
The first thing that it makes me think of is, although this book is a romance, and although there is a large romantic relationship that takes up a lot of the book, for me, the most important relationship that Charlotte has in this book is with herself. The most important love that she experiences is falling in love with herself again,
Yes.
if perhaps she ever did. And I wanted it to be really clear that regardless of what happened with Mary, if the relationship works out as it doesn't, Charlotte has got to a place where she understands and accepts herself for who she is, and she loves herself the way she never has done before. And it is a romance, and you can't deny the romantic element of it. It's a huge part, but the self-love was actually the giant overarching structure. It was almost like this is the bigger rainbow, and then there's a little rainbow underneath it. Not that we tell the publisher that. It's of course about romance, but that's kind of what I felt, is that it was important, because I don't watch this very much, but RuPaul says, if you don't love yourself, how is anyone else going to love you? And I think that's a lesson we could all learn. And in terms of motivation for storytelling in any respect, so like a lot of the time today we're talking about fiction, but one of the things that I teach, and I have coaching clients who are dealing with fiction and nonfiction, I'm quite comfortable straddling the boundary between the genres. And I do think that there are transferable skills and rules and ways of thought that you can apply to both in some quite unexpected ways. So when you're talking about motivation, is it why the character wants something? Why do they act the way that they do? And so one of the things that I sort of think about is writing voice. Okay, so that's something that has been said a lot when people have read Unlikely Pursuit, and that you kind of hit it on here. And thank you for the compliment, by the way. I did my best to stick to Austin's voice where possible, not to completely mimic it, but to kind of make sure that it stuck to the original relatively closely whilst being a little bit more accessible for a modern audience. And for me, voice is about character, location, and time. So who's the story about? Where are they in terms of genre, as well as physical location? Where are they situated in time? Is it past, present, future, alternate timeline? All that kind of forms the foundational basis for the character. And even the way that, not necessarily even the dialogue, but the prose itself is written can tell you so much about that character. So the second book in the series, which has just come out, is called The Miseducation of Caroline Bingley. And of course, she is a very different character. She's very haughty and vain and superior. She's the original mean girl. If you ask people in the original Pride and Prejudice universe who has been personally victimized by Caroline Bingley, they would all put up their hands. So one of the thankfully few critiques I got about Unlikely Pursuit was that Charlotte isn't quite as witty in some respects because she's not quite as socially aware as Elizabeth Bennet was. Now, Caroline is. And this is a result of them being who they are for me. Caroline Bingley says things that you literally could not waterboard out of Charlotte Lucas had you 100 years and great deal of enthusiasm for waterboarding. And to me, that was kind of like, this is how the character sees the world and interprets it. The way that you structure sentences, even the word choice, it just tells us so much about that person and how they see things. If you have a character describing, for example, a vase as being this beautiful aquamarine color, it reminds him of beach holidays with his family when he was a child, and then a second character is like, oh yeah, there's a vase in that room. It's sort of blue, sort of green. I don't know. It's whatever. Neither is wrong, but it's a matter of perspective. How are those characters seeing things? What is driving them to kind of do what they do? I have a little trick that I use to kind of get to know characters quite quickly. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before. It's called the coffee question.
Ooh, I love this.
So it tells you something very, very quickly. And a lot of the work that I do is about breaking down writing into really manageable, easy chunks, and how to kind of make sure that we're not gatekeeping it, that anyone can write, and here's how, and we're drawing back we've seen a magician on stage, it all looks effortless and amazing, but now we're going to go backstage and see where all the secret compartments are and see how it's really done. So the coffee question is, if your character went into a coffee shop, and imagine whatever time period they've gone into, whatever their equivalent of a coffee shop is, and they order something, and they are given their order and it is wrong. How do they respond? Because there's a huge spectrum there. Some characters are going to rant and rave and be like, my taxes pay your wages. You can't even get my coffee right. And other characters are going to go, okay, thank you. And then they're going to go outside and try to drink it or pour it out because they're embarrassed. They don't want to make the barista feel bad. Other people might be like, okay, well, I'm going to go and ask for them to remake it. There's a whole range of responses, but you instantly know quite a lot about the character by how they would respond to that question.
I love that. And I want everyone to try the coffee question with multiple characters, right? Because I think the more you understand how people respond, the more you can get into what's going on in their head, which then translates into their voice on the page. And one thing that Sue William Silverman talked about when I had her on the show, and she is a pretty famous memoirist, if you're not familiar with her, is this idea that we're all putting on a mask, right? And so we are writing the story from that mask, from that place, which is very similar to this coffee trick, which I'm going to be applying from now on.
It's really fun.
Yeah, it tells us so much. And we don't have to know the entire backstory of that person in order to get who they are. And that's really important because I think, especially for memoirists, they want you to know here's my unique, weird, odd, fill in the blank behavior, right, in the present moment. And then they're like, breaker one, let me tell you what happened in the past that caused me to behave in this way. And sometimes that can be useful, but often it's unnecessary. It slows the story down because anytime you go into flashback, you basically stalled the story, right? There is no forward momentum. And so learning how to limit that and be able to act as if someone has a specific backstory without sharing it is so helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's really interesting because the ways that we would interpret someone perhaps throwing a drink and screaming at a barista, there's a number of reasons that that could be the case. They might be a mean person who enjoys being rude. They might have had a terrible day or received some bad news. They might just be at the end of their tether. There's a whole host of reasons. We don't know that yet. We can only kind of guess at the backstory. But then when you see them interacting with other things, we will kind of know, okay, is this a common trait for them to behave in this way? Or was that a one-off? I completely agree. I think that one of the things I say very often is your story starts too soon. What is the last place your story can start that it still makes sense? It's such a temptation to go, okay, well, before I tell you the story, I'm going to give you a lot of context. But then we have all turned into that aged relative who's like, I met so and so at the supermarket today. Well, actually, it was a Tuesday and I bought this thing. And then, no, actually, tell me, I was at the post office today. And you're like, just tell me who you met and what was going on. Because by the time we get back here, I will no longer care. Just tell me what happened in the supermarket that was a shocking thing, and we will just go from there. We don't actually need to know. It's tempting to tell people, but we don't always need to know. You can write it, but it doesn't necessarily need to go into the final draft. It must be an iceberg. There's a lot going on underneath that will power the parts that we can see, but this is what they mean when they say kill your darlings. It's not literally murder off your prose. It is what are you choosing to put on the page to tell the reader, because not everything is relevant. And sometimes if you really are attached to a story or a piece of history, it's tempting to put that in, but is it relevant? Does it matter? What does it add to the story?
Yes. Always thinking about what it adds to the story. And what I often tell people is tell me where your story comes to life. And that's really telling. So if they're like on page one, not everyone says that in the draft phase, but that's really telling. So ask yourself that question, where does my story come to life? And then also, if you have readers, whether they're beta readers or part of a writing group, asking them to tell you where your story comes alive can be incredibly informative, and it can help you make decisions regarding how you can start as late as possible, what you can potentially cut. And then if it is something that you have an internal knowing about, like, oh my gosh, this really does belong in my book, can you place this strategically at a point when we actually need that information versus front loading in the way that we're at the post office and then we stop at the nursing home and then we stop 5 other places before we get to the grocery store or you actually met someone. Well, I'm wondering if you could read from The Unlikely Pursuit of Mary Bennett for just a paragraph so we can get a sense of what that voice is and the sensibility of this. I'm going to call it a series now because you have another one coming out, and I know people will be hungry for more. Give us a sense of that voice.
There's two covers. There's the US cover, which I think is the one that you're holding, and then there's also a UK cover, which is a little bit different because we had two different publishers for US and UK. Caroline Bingley does not have that problem. It has the same publisher. I would kind of like to start with the very first sentence in it and then maybe skip to something else a little bit as well. So, after procuring several fervent assurances that his wife would apologize sincerely and deeply for his absence from Rosings that evening, Mr. Collins reluctantly died. And I really love that line. One of the things that I really love about this book is the letters at the start of quite a lot of the chapters that are from other characters. There was one from Mrs. Bennet that was my favorite one because she's just such a terrible jerk.
He is.
That was maybe the funnest thing to write, is just someone being completely irritating in letter form. This is the start of chapter 10, and this is a letter from Mrs. Bennet. Dear Mrs. Collins, Mr. Collins's death quite disturbed me, for one generally considers the clergy closer to God, and therefore less likely to be called away to aid him, but I suppose in the end they are simply men like the rest. Nevertheless, sorrows and prayers for your loss. While you spend time with our Mary, I hoped you could elaborate on the great felicity of marriage. She may well listen to you, the Lord knows she does not listen to me. Having 4 girls out of 5 settled is very agreeable, but having one left over like a spare jar of jam rather ruins the effect. To be a mamma to wilful young ladies is to be constantly vexed. Really, no one understands how I suffer. Sincerely, Mrs. Bennet. And that just deeply amuses me because this is perfect for the character. Even though she is writing to offer condolences for someone else's dead husband, she's like, oh, but I suffer so much. Like,
Yeah.
you are so blissfully unself-aware, and I just love that about a character. It's a wonderful thing to get to write.
Hashtag narcissism.
I mean, just a touch, just a shade of the end.
Yeah, just a little. Well, how did you go about nailing these voices? When we think about voice, right, there's what you're thinking about as you're writing it, but there's the tone, there's the specific word choices you have, there's the way you write your sentences, the rhythmic nature of them. All of that comes into play on the page to help us understand the voice. And I think one of the words you just said is felicitousness.
The great felicity of your marriage, yeah.
Yeah, the great felicity of your marriage. No one in the 21st century is going to say that.
Yeah.
However, that is a perfect line for the time period that you're writing about. So, how'd you do that?
So one of the things I always like to do as a kind of joke was sort of try to imitate other writers or write in the form of other writers. So my friends and I would kind of email back and forth while we were at work, and sometimes I would pretend that I was writing as Hemingway or as someone else or Melville. So you kind of get to know, how does it look on the page? Are they using very long sentences, very short sentences? Are they sticking to quite simple words, like the way that Hemingway describes something? Or, for example, Geoffrey Archer versus Jack London. Very, very different times. Geoffrey Archer is not going to describe the trees in the Yukon as frowning great spruces or pines or whatever. He's going to be focused on the way that the characters are studying each other because something's going on. So, again, you're kind of getting into the head of that character the same way that you would, or that you can, with anyone else that you know. Imagine that you are getting into your friend's head and seeing the room from their eyes. What is your friend really into? Do they have like a hobby that they're into, or are they always drawn towards a particular color? Or what is it like if you have 5 friends come over and you've recently redone your living room? Do you know which one of them is likely to notice the new curtains or the new walls or the new cushions first? I love my friends, but I'm not sure they would necessarily notice. How much of your house do you think you could change before they did in fact notice, if you have slightly unobservant but very kind friends? And again, it's always about kind of getting into someone else's head. And I
Yes.
think that's something that I've always been good at in some way. I'm always imagining what it's like to be other people. And that does help. And if you are struggling with it, you can always try and just do the opposite of what you would do. So if you are really unobservant, try and be observant. and write the character like that. If you are very concerned with color and you would never wear white after Labor Day and you would never wear black and brown together, then write a character who does that and who hasn't even noticed that maybe their socks don't match or that they're wearing a watch that doesn't go with the rest of their belt or the rest of the outfit. Everyone's a little bit different.
I love that. And this is bringing back something you said in the beginning, is that we write in order to open people's hearts. And there's so much research around the fact that fiction, and also say nonfiction like memoir, it builds empathy, right?
Yes,
And one of the ways
absolutely.
that we build empathy is by taking on someone else's perspective. And so the more you can take on the perspective of someone else, whether it's a fictional person or someone else in your work that is part of your real life, the more you're going to build empathy. And from that empathy, we can then have compassion. So there's so much that we can learn just from paying attention to voice and how all of that works on the page. And I love what you said about the iceberg, because that, I think, is a great segue to talk about your other book that we're going to talk about today, An Honor and a Privilege, which I'm going to hold up again for people to see. So I'm going to just say, first off, before you even talk about this, I bow to you. I bow to you, because
Thank you.
when you described this, I was like, holy cow, that is just so ambitious, and you pull it off so well. So tell us about this book and what you were trying to accomplish.
Well, I have to first admit that my bravery is not quite the heady heights that you might think. If I had known just how much work this would be or how ambitious it actually was in the beginning, I might have faltered a little bit. I only realized halfway through, and by that point it was too late. I was already speeding down the mountain. There was no way to stop. It was just happening. And it's better kind of through than stopping. So, one of the things that I noticed when I was coaching writers of fiction and nonfiction, they were always asking what craft books they should read. And in some cases, I did have books that I recommended that I thought were good to develop confidence in your craft, that were good to develop specific techniques. But there wasn't really any book that kind of did everything that I wanted it to do. And so I found myself recommending multiple books. And I was thinking to myself, it's kind of a lot to ask, especially if you are writing a book for maybe the first or second time, or you're quite new to the process, giving people homework that is, read these books, which, by the way, those books also recommend other books. And before you
Yes.
know it, the whole thing snowballs and you're like, oh God, I've spent this whole year reading books and how do I apply any of it? And one of the things that I was seeing was, I mean, of course, if you are a craft book and you are kind of quoting a passage from an author that does the technique that you are talking about, you can't necessarily go and copy and paste in that author's whole book. That's completely insane. It would be a million pages long. But it is kind of frustrating to see that as a small picture. And I compared it to, it felt like teaching somebody to paint landscapes by showing them individual trees one at a time. And I could see that they were learning the techniques, but they didn't know how to apply it and they weren't quite sure. And I'm not a painter, so I would struggle also. And so what I was kind of doing with this was, okay, I wanted to get a book that was simultaneously a good, perhaps even great anthology of fiction across genres that did some really excellent things on a technical level. And I also wanted to provide a behind the scenes on how those were done, in what ways they were done, where we failed, where we succeeded, and kind of an in-depth look at the techniques that we used so that people could actually look at a full short story that is included and go, from beginning to end, I see how you use that technique. It is not an isolation. It is right there. You can read it from start to finish. And again, a short story is not going to take you as much time as a novel. This was my attempt at going, okay, these are all of the things I've been teaching for several years. I desperately want people to know these things. Every single story will tell you something. It will show you how to do something. And hopefully you'll be able to see the easiest way to start applying these techniques. Again, I don't want to gatekeep. If anything, I want everybody in the party having fun with us.
And I can tell that you had fun with this, even though I can also imagine it was really daunting to get done.
Yeah.
And what I would say is, in terms of the tone and the feel of these stories, they're very different from the romance work that you're doing. And I personally felt haunted by them in a really good way. When I was reading The Unlikely Pursuit, I would think about it in the daytime, wonder when they're going to get together or how this is going to work out. And so then you had me staying up too late, right? I could almost hear your voice in my head going like, "Go to bed." And I'm like, "You're not my dad."
Yeah. It's true,
Which
I'm
is
not
an
your real
inside
dad,
joke.
yep.
But yeah, there was something that was sticky, but also really happy about that book. I mean, there was a joyfulness to it.
Yeah,
And this is a lot darker. And part of what made this so dark, at least for me, is how much is unsaid,
yeah.
right? That's the part that haunted me. And that brings us back to that concept of the iceberg, which I think fiction writers feel a lot of freedom around. And I'm not saying that you don't see the issue of the flashbacks that don't belong or the starting too early, because that happens regardless of the genre that you're working in. But I think memoirs in particular feel like they have to give us everything. I tell people all the time, I want you to act as if this character has a backstory and don't tell us anything about it.
Mhm.
Just have them behave
Yeah,
as if it's there. And you do this so well in this book. And I think one of the stories that for me really exemplifies that is The Sun Ablaze and The Sun Buried. And so, can you tell us about, at a high level, what this story is about? Because I want people to read this because I love the story and then I love how you take it apart. That is really how we learn, is when we can analyze something in real time. And that's the benefit of this book. And then once you've done that, you see how someone put things together, you can say, oh, now I can go do that in my own writing, which was your whole point. But what would
exactly.
you like us to know about this story?
I completely agree with what you're saying. To me, I'm quite a visual and kinetic learner. I need to be able to look at and touch things and take them apart, as you said, in order to be able to do this. If you were to describe to me over audio how to take apart a clock, I would just be lost. But if you were to show me and I was allowed to do it myself afterwards, I would be able to do that then. I'd be able to replicate those things. So the easiest way to describe this story is Icarus on a farm.
Yeah.
That is the pithy pitch that I think we came to in that. So, one of the things that I had been asking people when each of these wonderful, amazing writers that had generally agreed to do this without actually me explaining it, I was like, "Do you want to do a thing?" And they all went, "Yeah." And I went, "No, you should really wait to see what the thing is." And they were like, "Yeah, I wanted." I was like, "No, no, really, because you should know me better than that. You probably shouldn't say yes before you know what you're getting into." But one of the first things that I had asked them was, "What moves you? What is thing that drives you? What do you like to write about?" And often I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from them. And E.A. Petricone, who I wrote the story with, we started talking about family and secrets and lies and betrayal and family. And it always just kept coming back to this idea. And I was like, we can happily come up with something together. But I had this idea kind of a long time ago, and I wasn't developed. All I really had written to myself was Icarus on a farm. And she went, "Oh, well, do you know I've got a lot of feelings about that whole myth?" And I went, "Okay, do tell," because she is Greek American. And she went off, and I was like, "Right." So, I mean, I'm sure everyone kind of vaguely knows of the story of Icarus. They are escaping a labyrinth by flying out. Daedalus, the father, is an inventor. He makes wings out of feather and wax, and he warns Icarus not to fly too close to the sun, or the wings will melt. Icarus does. He falls into the sea and drowns. I was never totally certain that Daedalus didn't know he was going to do that. That there wasn't something slightly resentful or bitter about him. You certainly warned your son, but did you keep an eye on him? Because in a lot of these myths, he's so pleased with his own ambition. It's only when he looks back that he realizes that Icarus has fallen into the sea and drowned. He doesn't even notice when it's happening. And Icarus is calling out to him and he doesn't notice. Or maybe he did and he just chose not to turn. And so I thought, okay, how do we kind of transpose that in a way that's more of a realistic thing? And I grew up in quite a rural place, a town of less than 10,000 people. And Elena's grandparents had owned and lived on a farm. And so this all kind of started coming together. And the thing for us was we really wanted to dig into this relationship between Ike and his dad. Ike has come home because his older brother Joe, who stayed on the farm and didn't leave for college, has died. And Ike has come home. His dad is a truculent, awful old man, and he is trying to figure out how to be on the farm, how to be without Joe, and what the hell happened. I mean, what really happened here? And how do I cope with dad? And how do I cope with the fact that I think he's never really liked me, and maybe I've never liked him? And is that because we're too similar? And what does that say about me? And there's a lot of really awful kind of father-son things coming through there that are all kind of tied up with these symbols of masculinity, and how does a young buck prove himself a good enough stag to mate with the does? Well, he fights another stag and he has to win. So there's this kind of, we're about to be budding antlers at some point, and it's not even a question of kind of if, but when.
One of the things that you do so well is you set up that Joe's gone, but you don't tell us what happened.
Yeah.
Right? It's just there as this ghost in the story. And as the reader, I'm paying close attention to this relationship between Ike and his father. But at the same time, there's this part of me that's always like, and what really did happen? And how is that going to come into play? Right? How is that going to come into play in the story?
Yeah.
And I think it's just such a great example of how you don't have to tell us everything. And sometimes not telling us what happened actually enhances your story. It makes it more haunting, and it creates what I call the chew factor on the story, because there's that mystery that is not quite solved that you're trying to solve for yourself. And so you're thinking about the story for longer and longer periods of time.
I like that, the chew factor.
And I talk to people all the time, like, what do you want people to chew on? Do you want them to be in their head? Do you want them to be in their hearts? And what do you want to leave them with?
And one of the things with this story is, again, like I said in the beginning, we're always trying to speak in writing is the language of emotions. And it is a rare person who can say they have never felt in any way that they have ever disappointed their parents, that they have never resented the weight of any familial expectation. I mean, if you haven't, good for you. Well done. That's amazing. And I'm glad for you that you've escaped that trap. But it's quite common. Most people know how that feels. So again, even if you've never been on a farm or you've never been in this situation, you're like, oh, I remember what it feels like to feel like I failed a test that I didn't even know was happening. I know what it feels like to feel like maybe somebody prefers somebody else in the family over me. I feel like an outsider in some way. I don't know if I belong here. And at the same time, I still want to make my dad proud. I want that validation, even if I'm still fighting with myself over I don't need it, but God, do I want it in some way?
Yeah. And it speaks to those motivations that we all have that fuel what we do here in real life and also what we do on the page. And I think that's another thing that you do really well. And there's one motivation I want to ask you about in relation to who you chose to be in this book, right? So there were some names that I recognized, some authors I'm going to now look up, but the last story is with your wife. And sometimes people can work really well together, and sometimes they don't. And what's interesting to me, because I'm a fan of both of your works, and so I'm going to actually link to my episode with Zabib because she was on the show as well. What was that like? How'd you navigate it? Because your voices are so different.
They are. And that was one of the hardest things about this whole book about Unhonored Privilege, is that I didn't realize, and I don't know why I didn't realize, but I definitely didn't, that not only was I going to have to be just as good as all of these writers, who, by the way, I had all picked because they were better than me at something, if not many things. So I was like, oh, I'm going to learn from them. I didn't realize that I was also going to have to mimic their voices. So it ended up feeling, while I was writing, because you don't want it to come off like two people are writing a story. That's my pet peeve. I absolutely hate that. If you can actually actively tell, if it's one perspective, it should read as one voice. So I sort of felt like I was learning to speak a language by translating it at the same time. And it was sort of maddening, but it was a great challenge. There was actually a point in The Sun Buried, The Sun Ablaze where EA left me a comment and she said, "Did you write this line or did I?" And I was like, I think I know the answer, but even I'm not 100% sure, and I'm normally very sure because we had started to meld together so well. Now, with Zabib, of course, we write in very different ways. We think in very different ways as people, and we're concerned with different things in our stories as well. So she is my first reader, always. I am hers. And people are always asking, like, what is it right to date another writer? And I'm like, quiet, really quiet. A lot of work. We're constantly doing something. It's always, schedules are always kind of around the books. Incidentally, she has a book coming out next year that's going to be absolutely incredible called My Darling Clementine. And so a lot of the things that I admire that she does are different from the things that I do that she admires. And some of the things that really to use a Scottish phrase, rip my knitting, are things that she does, and vice versa. So one of the earliest, I think, kind of semi-arguments about writing that we had is I was like, my God, your characters are just constantly in hallways and corridors, and this is in the West Wing. And she was like, they need to have a conversation. I'm like, they can have it in the car. Get in the car. Like, what is this mincing around talking all the time? Like, you got to be going somewhere. She had someone in a previous book burst into someone else's house and go, the government's coming for us, we need to leave. Then they put the kettle on. And I was like, well, I don't believe it. You know, Jason Bourne would never have put the kettle on. He would have run out of that house. And similar to that, she's always like, why is everyone going places? Why are they always there? Your scene transition is so abrupt. They never hang out in a corridor. I'm like, no, I hate a corridor. So it was kind of funny to consider the things that we both really like to do that are opposites, and then some things that we both really like. There were a lot of specifically racial things happening in America that kind of drove the premise of this. So essentially, the premise of the story is that a woman wakes up in her grave and is like, oh my God, they buried me alive. I was ill. I don't feel like I was that ill. My family are idiots. And she crawls out of her grave and then realizes, oh, time has passed significantly and something has called her out. And she now has to go and help one of her ancestors who has been caught up in a racially motivated riot. And she's like, oh wow, some things have really changed. Some things have not changed at all. And it felt like a really angry howl of a story. I actually think it would be a fantastic film someday, maybe, because I would really like to see somebody kill it in this role. And we were thinking about the different ways in which we saw character, the different ways in which we would have described even the light glinting off the tombstones in the graveyard. Should it be from the moon? Should it be from the streetlights? Is it going to be something natural that she sees first or something to her unnatural? We really got very granular with it because there's arguments that you could make for everything.
And I think it's that attention to detail, which is part of why that story and all of the stories in this book really work. It's because you did get granular and you talk about how you got granular throughout this entire book. And I applaud the entire effort. And my husband is not a writer, but if he was, we would not be able to write a story together. I feel very confident about that. So I was incredibly impressed that the two of you were able to meld everything together. And that's, I think, one of the things that I love about this is that I can't tell. I mean, it never feels like two people are writing these
Yeah.
stories. It always feels like one person writing the story. And so you shared a couple of things that are funny to me, but also, yes, I get it. Don't be in a corridor. Don't put the kettle on. If you just shared some information that we've got to run. Okay, I'm going to ask about the long paragraph. Frightening or exciting?
Oh, I love a long paragraph, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
We can't be friends anymore.
Well, you've caught it on video, the moment when the great friendship died. Okay, I will send you a chapter of my PhD novel, and I will prove to you that not only is a long paragraph a fun and exciting thing to do when used appropriately, but a long sentence. How long do you think the longest sentence is in this chapter that I will send you? It's the longest sentence I ever wrote in my life.
Oh, are you asking like word count
Yep.
or I mean, I feel like it's probably the whole paragraph. That's my guess. The number that's coming to mind is 1,200 words, which feels ridiculous, but maybe it's
It's not even
not.
that far off. It's like 800 something. And it works. It absolutely works because of the way this character thinks and because of the thing that's happening in the moment is all running together for her. That being said, I wouldn't suggest that anyone start writing 800 word sentences every sentence unless that's your character. It does get very tiring. I'm a big fan of varying it up. Language has rhythm. Your eyes also get really tired. Something I see a lot at the moment, and I don't know whether it's because AI kind of permeates things or the way that things are being formatted. Maybe that's how people are seeing it, but I'm seeing a lot of people have paragraphs that are one or two sentences long, and they start a new paragraph, one or two sentences long, and the whole book is just short, short, short. It makes it look like bullet points, and I'm like, please don't do this. It's very visually boring to the eye, and it looks like steady. It just looks like a drum beat or a hi-hat. There's no melody to it. It's just
Yes.
rhythm the whole time. And what I need to see is that being varied on the page. Otherwise, your eyes do start to kind of gloss over it.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if it's not necessarily AI, though it certainly could be, but if it's also the newsletters we all get. Newsletters are meant to be skimmable, so they're meant to have these short paragraphs, but yeah, if it's like 2 sentences, that's not really a paragraph. I've actually found that as well. And I was working with one client and pulling things together and reparagraphing. It was just too short. Well, I don't think you've necessarily convinced me on the long paragraph yet. However, I'm going to preface it. So, first, I'm going to say I am willing to be convinced and I look forward to reading this paragraph. I also say, listeners, if you have strong feelings about the long paragraph, please share them in the comments because we want to hear about them. But what I'll say for me personally is it's not necessarily the long paragraph in and of itself, it's when there are a lot of them. If I see the long paragraph and I start flipping pages and it's like nothing but long paragraphs, I start to shudder a little bit and I feel like I'm not sure I can get through this book. I think it's because my eyes will get tired. But if you have one long paragraph and there's a strong payoff and it's doing it well, which I know you can, then you can get away with it once in a while.
I mean, I advise that you don't read Duck's Newburyport because it's all one sentence and it's like 1,200 pages long.
Yeah, no, I can't do
Yeah,
that.
that sounds like your nightmare is waking up in a place and being like, oh, this is my hell, is reading this one long book that's just one long sentence. No, I completely agree. It has to earn its place. And if you have been building to that, if you have been doing something with the character where things are kind of starting to kick off and there's a little bit of action and then suddenly breathlessly they are describing something either very frightening or very joyful all coming together as one, it can be super super effective, but it will always be tempered if you've already done it. It's like jumping out and shouting boo at people. It really works well the first time and after that they kind of know it's coming, so you've got to be kind of careful about when you do things.
Yeah, you have to keep the reader on the edge of their seat. And some of that is visual and some of that is about the content that you're bringing to the story. So, really thinking about intentionally what am I doing and why am I doing it and how does it come together? Well, as we begin to wrap up, I just want to ask a question that I did not share with you. And of course, I've done that a couple of times. You have been producing so much work. I see this momentum building. You're getting these awards. You're having multiple books in the same genre come out. This is an exciting time. And yet, excitement can also be tinged with fear. And so, what scares you about the writing life right now? Or what is it that you're trying to navigate that maybe is a little difficult?
I think it worries me the way that the publishing industry sometimes leans too much towards whatever they think is the new shiny trend
Yeah.
without taking into account the merit of things that perhaps don't fit that mold. And that's something that I've seen and heard about anecdotally as well. And I find that kind of stressful because you might write an excellent book, but it might just not fit with someone's vision for something right now. That doesn't mean to say that the book will never be published. It might just not be for right now. But that's kind of stressful sometimes when you don't know. And so the only thing you ever know or have control over is write the best damn book you can for yourself. And I'm always writing for myself. And maybe that's the reason I write so much, is because I have a little story splinter in me that I have to work out at some point. It's got to come out or it will create an infection. It's a horrible analogy. It's gross. But it's something that I think about a lot. And I'm always telling myself the story first. If I woke up and everyone on earth was gone, I would still write books. I would still tell stories because I am telling myself them first. And as I said at the start of this interview, I write stories that don't exist yet because I go looking for them and they don't exist. And I'm frustrated because, listen, if I could get someone else to do them for me, that would be great. I'm sneakily farming out ideas all of the time, very subtly, to my friends and family. They don't know. If I have writers around, I'm like, oh, have you ever thought of doing this? And it's great when they take me up on it because then I didn't have to write the book. Somebody else did. That's great. It's less effort for me. You know, if you're a chef, you don't always want to cook dinner. Sometimes you want to go to a restaurant. But that's kind of what scares me at the moment, is that it's not always kind of a meritocracy. It is sometimes a trend chasing thing. And you never kind of know which way the wind is going to blow next.
Yeah, there is very much this shiny object syndrome out there. And yeah, so I love what you said. Write the best damn book that you can
Yeah.
and own the story, right? Do it for the joy, do it for the love, and tell the story that you want. And then figure out how you want to get it out into the world. And maybe that will be with a traditional publisher. Maybe that will be self publishing. Maybe it will be something in between. And you get to decide. And I think that's one of the aspects of the writing world that gives me a little bit of hope right now, is that at one point if you were self-publishing as an example, it was really seen as vanity publishing. It was looked down upon. And it's not to say that there aren't people who are doing it for that reason, right? They just want to feel like they have a book in their hands and they're not willing to do the work. But if you do the work, great things can come from it. And you can produce something that has reach if you're willing to put in the hard work to make it happen.
Unfortunately, this is what nobody wants to hear, but it is hard work. It's worth it,
Yes.
though. It really is. There's nothing as satisfying or amazing that reveals something about the universe and about yourself than writing a book.
100% agree. I mean, this is how humans have connected with other humans for millennia, right? We connect through stories. And when you can share your story, you are part of this lineage and you are bringing people together. And there is something wonderful about that. Well, if people want to learn more about you, they want to buy your books, and also be sure to tell us about your podcast that you have. What are the ways that they can connect with you?
So I am on Instagram at Lindz.McLeod, and I'm on Blue Sky at Lindz McLeod. If you like cat pictures, I have cat pictures. There are many cat pictures there.
And they are amazing, I must say.
My young furry sons are very beautiful. Actually, one of them is more famous than me. I have actually been approached at a convention with the cry, "Oh my God, you're Fitzwilliam's mum." And I was like, oh, I thought I was being recognized for me, and I was not. This is for my cat. So you can find me there. Our podcast is called Cinema Worms, and we review spoiler-free all of the latest films. You don't have time to watch as many films as I do, and probably have better things to do. So come and listen to us review those things so you can decide what you want to spend your time, your valuable time on. Also, I just did one on the Michael Jackson film. Yes, I sat through it, and I kind of eviscerated it afterwards in quite a funny way. We usually see films together, but we do sometimes see them separately. Somebody refused to go to that, so I sat alone, and it was really quite funny. So I do recommend that one as well. And you can find me at my website as well, lindsmcleod.co.uk.
And if you listen for no other reason, you've already heard how delightful Lindz is, and you've heard how funny she is. So imagine if she has the whole stage and she gets to produce all of it. So I'm going to be listening to that episode, that's for sure, because I've been curious about that movie. And I know I'm going to love your movie. I already know it. So we're going to link that in the show notes. So listeners, all you have to do is just click, and everything else that Lindz is up to, her website, her Instagram, all of that will also be in the show notes so that you can easily connect with her. And please do connect with Lindz because she's amazing. You will love her as much as I do. And I know that whatever happens in that interaction, it will benefit you.
Thank you very much. If I can make the world a little bit of a better place than when I entered it, that's my life's purpose complete. I'm super happy to do it. And thank you, my friend, for just always being such a calm beacon of light.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you so much for being on the show. It has been an absolute delight and it's made my day.
Me too.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Lindz, and most importantly, buy copies of The Unlikely Pursuit of Mary Bennett, The Miseducation of Caroline Bingley, An Honor and a Privilege, or any of the other books that Lindz has published, please see the show notes for this episode. And if you want to take this content a little deeper, grab your journal and think about a relationship in your life. It could be real or fictional, but it should be one where something important was never said. Maybe it was a parent who showed love through action but never words, a friendship that ended without explanation, or a moment when silence said everything. Now, write a scene where your character is in that relationship and let them behave as if the unspoken thing is always present, but don't name it directly. You can make my day by sharing your insights, questions, or ideas for future episodes in the YouTube comments. And speaking of listeners who've made my day, I want to offer a sincere thank you to Wendy Kanar and Yvette Masudi 2224 for your comments on my episodes on debunking author platform myths and author platform strategies. It was so wonderful to hear from you. And listeners, if you haven't reached out to the show, I would love to hear from you too. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I couldn't do this podcast without your support. If you love this episode, here are 3 simple ways that you can keep this show thriving. 1. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. 2. Leave a 5-star review so others can find the show. 3. Join my engaged, dynamic community by signing up for the Writing Your Resilience newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of Ditch Your Inner Critic, 5 tools to transform self-doubt into self-support. Until next time, remember that your story matters. As you write and connect with the truest, most authentic version, you become not just the writer, but the person you're meant to be. And that, my friends, is the real freedom writing can offer.